Howdy everybody, I wanted to share with you what might be the most fun build I've ever actually played in Diablo 2 in the entire history of me playing this game. And I think it's because they fixed one tiny thing in 2.4 that makes it so that you can really set off and become the ultimate support mercenary for your mercenary. Welcome everybody to easily the most fun I've had in Diablo 2. This is no cap, you don't have to stop the presses. This is the most fun I've ever had, especially playing a sorceress. This is the Mercenary Sorceress. That's right, we end up just supporting our mercenary. She's now the protagonist of this game, and we walk around as a stat stick and a static procer while running a massive enchant buff so that she can absolutely shred everything in the game. Now, for this to make sense, you have to understand a very important thing about the mercenary, and that is that with the addition of something like Kuko Shikaku, which says fires explosive arrows or bolts, she basically gets double her exploding arrow proc, and this is something that used to not work in LOD. I've only tested the truth of whether or not she actually gets the exploding arrow on her normal attack, and it appears to be working in 2.4. I don't have the ability to modify, the merc AI tables and the monster resistances tables, so I would need someone who actually has that ability to fully prove it. But let's say that it doesn't work at all, and while you're watching the footage I'm going to show you, she is able to murder amazingly high level, high value farming areas all on players 8. So just understand that literally every single bit of farming video that you're going to see here is all on players 8 difficulty. Your mercenary makes 4 decisions while she's walking around with monsters: whether or not she's going to cast Inner Sight, Fire Arrow, Exploding Arrow, or do a basic attack. Every time she does a basic attack, she actually replaces that with a lower level exploding arrow. On top of that, the exploding arrow that you get out of Kuko Shikaku gets the synergy as if she has the skill level fire arrow that she does. So rather than going Inner Sight, basic attack, fire arrow, exploding arrow, she's choosing exploding arrow 2 times, fire arrow once, and Inner Sight once. And just to quickly go over the rest of her gear, so it's an upgraded Kuko Shikaku. Upgrading it is very important because fire arrow is going to convert your physical damage into fire damage when it applies. So being able to max out her physical damage as much as possible goes a long way so that her fire arrow also deals a very competent amount of damage. Kuko Shikaku is also going to give her +3 to bow and crossbow skills. We put a shale in there so we can get her down to the 11 frame attack point along with the treachery that she wears. And then there's 2 really important parts here. 1, it adds on base fire damage, and 2, it has 50% chance to pierce. When added on with our wisdom, that means that she's piercing 83% of the time. Now, why is adding on fire damage so important? Well, exploding arrow takes any sources of additional fire damage that you have and applies it to the explosion. Then on top of that, regardless of whether or not you hit, when this arrow makes contact with the target, it explodes. If you happen to hit and pierce, it then goes on and explodes on the next target as well. So firing into a massive group of monsters drastically increases this explosion damage. And then when you add on the massive enchant that we're going to put onto her as well, you're applying upwards of 6k damage multiple times to every pack per explosion. We talked about the wisdom. Not only does it give her that cannot be frozen, which is incredibly important, but it also gives her a bonus to attack rating. Now we're going to fix her attack rating later on as well, but this goes a long way to make sure that she's hitting as often as possible and piercing so we can get that massive explosion domino effect going. Lastly, she's using a treachery. I tried out a lot of different armors on her. It turns out that the treachery is the most important for both her survivability, adding additional non-fire damage to her kit with the venom, which is actually pretty substantial, especially on lower player settings. And then lastly, just getting her that physical damage reduction, max cap res, and curse length reduction that you're going to get from Fate. Now, I bring up the fact that our sorceress becomes the mercenary in this regard. Now, how do we go about doing that? Well, first, we want to maximize the enchant bonus that we give to her. First, let's look at the skill tree so you better understand what we're trying to maximize with our gear. Obviously, we're going for the highest level enchant that we can possibly get. So we're maxing out warmth as the synergy for enchant itself, and then fire mastery, since that adds the elemental damage to the buff that we're going to give. In the lightning tree, we want to have enough points in static field so when we swap over to our lightning gear, we have 22 yards of static radius, because that's what you need to hit the entirety of your screen. You put 1 point down into Lightning Mastery, and then your dump points into Thunderstorm as a pretty solid secondary damage type against fire immune monsters. Lastly, we want to pick up a good amount of CC here so that the Mercenary isn't trying to run away from monsters and is just attacking as often as possible. So we pick up both Frost Nova and Glacial Spike, which was a pickup that I got about halfway through testing when I realized if I could just stop monsters in their tracks, Mercenary is safe and just can keep gunning. We also pick up a 1 point Wonder Frozen Armor just so that if we happen to get hit, the monsters get frozen as well. The reason why we're picking up a 1 point Cold Mastery here is that monsters' cold resistance actually decreases the length of freeze and chill effects. So a 1 point Wonder here basically means we're getting the full length of the freeze on Glacial Spike for anything that isn't immune to cold. For the gear that we're using on our enchant side of things, so this is what we're going to do at the beginning of every farming session, so I do recommend farming as many spots as possible, since enchant at full buff is actually going to last close to 1300 seconds. So for people who don't want to do the math, that's about 20 minutes worth of buff time. Keep in mind as well, again, this gear is bananas, and this isn't even the best in-slot gear that you could possibly get. I'm just too lazy to go hero edit a blue orb with +6 to enchant and +6 to fire mastery, as well as 2 sockets with 2 facets. That is the strongest version that you can get, but what we're using is an Ashudas with an additional fire facet in it, an enchant Ormus robe with an additional fire facet in it, Flickering Flame for the +3 to fire skills here. You could actually also get a +3 to fire skills with multiple sockets, put facets in that as well. Again, this is just the easiest way for me to get the plus skills that we wanted. A ridiculous amulet here, you actually don't need a 220, and again, you could actually use a 3 to fire skills 10 FCR amulet, but I do like the sorceress skill since we're going to be using this also on our mercenary support swap, so it's nice to have the stats there. Obviously a spirit, any boots will do, but Alders are really nice. Any skill rings, I prefer Bulkathos since that flat life is going to get boosted by our battle orders. Arachnid Mesh, Mage Fist for the +1 to fire skills, as well as the faster cast rate. An entire inventory of fire skillers to start, along with an Annie and a Torch, as well as life all res here. You actually don't need this much life and this much all res. If you were trying to do this and be a really super effective Magic Find build, you can drop Magic Find down here as well. But this is what we're using for the maximum enchant bonus. Obviously, we have a Call to Arms on swap for that additional +1 skill, and we're going to be recasting battle orders as often as we need to keep our life and the mercenary's life up. So when you're fully buffed out, you're going to cast your battle command, cast your battle orders, you cast your frozen armor as well, and then you enchant yourself and your mercenary. And I'll go over why enchanting yourself is so important. You'll see now that our mercenary bumps up to a whopping 6k fire damage on her base attack. That's adding 6k fire damage on top of her fire arrow. And again, 6k plus the 1000 damage here, 7000 damage on her exploding arrow, which we're also getting whenever she shoots off a normal arrow as well. Now here's where the build gets interesting. What did I mean when I said we are the mercenary now? Well, we're rocking the Infinity. The reason why we're using the Infinity here is for 2 parts on that Conviction aura, and then 1 part on that minus enemy res, and then lastly on the Crushing Blow that it gives to us. The Conviction aura is obviously going to drastically reduce resistances on monsters. This is going to break a lot of the fire immunes that you would come into contact with. It's going to break just about every single lightning immune in the game, as well as drastically reduce monsters' defense. So our mercenary is going to have near 95% chance to hit whenever she's firing at a target that's under the Conviction aura's radius, and that's so important because she needs to hit to pierce, and she needs to pierce to get multiple explosions per arrow shot. But remember when I said that it was so important for you to enchant yourself as well? Go ahead and take this Infinity and just look at your normal attack. You'll see that we're boasting 17 to 20,000 damage on our normal attack. The reason why this is so important is because this Conviction aura actually goes a really long way for us as well. The enchant gives us a decent amount of attack rating. And with the Conviction aura up, we also have a near 95% chance to hit everything, including bosses, and we're only level 87. This doubles down on being so important because that Crushing Blow is massive for increasing your kill speed against players' 8 bosses, most namely Mephisto and Baal. The reason why we build it in a man catcher is because it's going to be the fastest base that we can get for our own attack speed. We don't really have any other sources of increased attack speed, so you're swinging at around a 14 or 15 frame attack, 40% chance of Crushing Blow. And then lastly, that minus enemy resistance is so important because we have this Thunderstorm up, and on top of that, we're also casting static. So if a monster has lightning resistance, static is less effective at reducing its life. With all of the minus res that we do, we're doing true damage with our static. So dropping them down to the 50% watermark that you can get into hell only takes 2 to 3 statics, and we're hitting the entire screen with this effect. For the rest of our gear on this side of the swap, since we want to buff out our static, as well as our lightning mastery, increase thunderstorm damage, increase thunderstorm's damage on the base skill itself, but also need to have an incredible amount of survivability. We're going to be taking a lot of the hits, and even if we bow up here, we're sitting around 2,500 life, which is nice. But on this swap, we have overcapped res, 23 physical damage reduction. The way that we get there is by using a Crown of Ages, which we have 2 light facets in. We are using a Chains of Honor for additional all res, additional to our skills, as well as that damage reduction. And then we need to swap out a single ring for this FCR breakpoint. We're going to be teleporting around at the 63 breakpoint. So with just Arachnid Mesh, Mage Fist, and a 220 Amulet, it's not enough. So you need to drop onto 1 ring here. So where do you farm on this build? Just remember, and I know I already said it, everything that you're watching right now is on Players 8 difficulty. Every single farming spot that we went to, we did it on Players 8. So if you're farming on anything less than that, your clear speed is going to actually be so fast, you're going to wonder why more people aren't doing this. And even on Players 8, you absolutely shred, and you're able to farm some amazingly powerful areas. In Act 1 alone, you can go and farm the Mausoleum, and hell, why not? Kill Blood Raven while you're on the way. If you really want to kill her, I recommend name locking and teleporting towards her so that your mercenary is always within range to hit her with Exploding Arrow. You obviously are going to be farming the cows as well. The cows are probably one of the best places to bring the build, and it's where I used the litmus test of what we need to do to be able to farm efficiently in an area like this. Being able to farm the Countess, being able to go and farm Indariel as well is really nice. On Players 8, in the Catacombs, it can be a little bit difficult to handle some of the packs, like the Arachnids. Killing Tainted, killing Ghouls, killing Zombies, and even killing Falling packs are absolute cakewalks, and you get a ton of packs on the way to Indariel. In Act 2, obviously, the Stony Tombs is one of the best places to go. I did notice, and this is where we first started swinging around the Infinity ourselves, that some of the Burning Dead skeletons can be magic resistant and fire enchanted, and at that point Infinity is only barely breaking their immunities. So after clearing off the pack, make sure to swap over to melee and absolutely smash down any of these, while your Thunderstorm and your Mercenary's physical damage help to carry the way a little bit. I was actually really surprised how effective this build was in the Arcane Sanctuary, especially on Players 8. In Act 3, there are a couple good places that you can go. One, going and farming Serena in the Ruined Temple, you absolutely demolish her, as well as the Gargantuan Beast and the Ghoul Lords. But again, those Arachnids have pretty high resistances, so I would skip them. Gun down Mephisto. This is another place where auto-attacking yourself goes a really long way, and getting that crushing blow on him as early as possible helps to increase your kill speed against him. Sadly, Act 4 is one of the places where you really can't farm, at least not on Players 8. You can definitely do Players 1 Chaos Sanctuary as long as you're willing to be a little bit patient in case Infector Souls spawns as additionally fire immune. On Players 1, you can absolutely just seal pop and smash the seal bosses, and then go and get an easy Diablo kill. Act 5 has a lot of really interesting places for you to farm. Obviously, Eldritch, Shank, and Pindle are absolute cakewalks, even on high player settings. One of the really interesting places is just off of the Ancient's Way. You can go down into the Drifter Cavern. Drifter's Cavern doesn't spawn with any naturally occurring fire immune, so it's a really nice place for you to go. The only thing that you need to keep in mind is I would have Fade procced on your Mercenary's Treachery before you walk in there, just in case you run into souls. The last 2 places that I was very surprised with were Worldstone Keep itself, as well as the Throne Room in Bale. So even on Players 8 in Worldstone, even with souls, it was really easy for us to gun down packs wherever we went. Once you walk into the Throne Room itself, if you're on single player, I would recommend bumping down player settings on Waves 1, Waves 4, and Waves 5, as well as when you're walking into the Throne Room, just so that in case Moonlords spawn there as well, they're not super difficult for you to handle. But even on Players 8, really overperformed in ways that I was very surprised with. Now, when we're talking about Players 8 Bale kill speed, I wouldn't say that this is anything to write home about. Obviously, there's no real benefit to farming Bale on Players 8. Players 3 is where he caps on an experience, and at Players 5, you're getting the max drops from him. If you are just in the mood for pure farming Worldstone Keep, Throne Room, and Bale on Players 8, the build can do it, which is incredibly surprising. I hope that this video goes a long way to help add to this narrative that's forming in the community that, first off, there are other ways of playing this game than just having an Act 2 Infinity Mercenary. Secondly, there are different ways of playing the Sorceress than just running around as a Blizzard Sorc or a Hydra Sorc. Obviously, you can build this out as pure fire and drop down Hydras yourself as well. I messed around with it a little bit. I found this way of maximizing as many different skills as possible, got the most use out of the gear that we're using, and helps out the mercenary to the most that we can as well. And lastly, obviously, the gear's ridiculous, the build's ridiculous. This is super end game. This is something to build to in solo self-found after a month or two, something to drop the rest of your extra currency on near the end of a ladder season. But it is absolutely the most fun I've had playing this game in a long time. And I hope that the Enchant Mercenary supporting an Act 1 rogue with Kuko Shikaku adds itself to the list of bucket builds that you need to try before the ladder season is over. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.